Have you ever believed your life was too small to make a difference? That a garage covered in grease could never be the beginning of something beautiful? That one broken wheelchair could change not just a boy's day, but a woman's entire future? This isn't just a story about fixing what's broken. It's about a girl with golden hands, a lonely boy who needed more than just new wheels, and a father who didn't realize he was about to meet someone who'd fix more than his son's chair, someone who might just fix his heart. In a forgotten little town where nothing much ever happened, a woman named Kay Monroe was just trying to keep her head down and her garage open. She wasn't chasing love. She wasn't waiting for miracles. She was just surviving until a black Rolls Royce pulled up to her dusty lot, until a wheelchair tipped, and until a 5-year-old with bright blue eyes looked up at her and said, "My mom used to say, people like you have golden hands." What came next? Well, if you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever carried a past you're not proud of, or if you've ever wondered if second chances are real, this story is for you. So sit back, because what started with a flat tire, a scraped knee, and a stranger's fury turned into something that would change 3 lives forever. And maybe, just maybe, change the way you see love, forgiveness, and what it really means to be family. Let's begin. If you had passed by Kay's auto repair that morning, you probably wouldn't have looked twice. It was just a small roadside garage, its paint peeling, its sign half faded, and the scent of motor oil permanently soaked into the air. But if you stepped a little closer, you'd see something else. You'd see a young woman, her jeans stained, her hands steady, leaning over the open hood of a pickup like it was a living thing. That woman was Kay Monroe, 28 years old, no college degree, no famous last name. But if you asked anyone in Millstone who you call when your engine cried for help, they'd all say the same thing. Go to Kay. She won't just fix your truck. She'll fix your faith in people. Because that's what she did. Quietly, day after day. Kay didn't grow up with much. Her parents died when she was 15. The foster homes changed as often as the bed sheets. But one thing stayed the same. Her need to understand how things worked, how things broke, and how they could be put back together. She learned to turn a wrench before she could drive. She taught herself to listen for problems not just in engines, but in people too. A local hardware store once caught her stealing a $9 socket wrench. She was 19, hungry, cold. The store owner pressed charges. But the officer who picked her up that night didn't cuff her. Instead, he sat her down and said, "You don't need to steal tools, kid. You've got the hands of someone who can build a life." Kay never forgot that, and she never stole again. By the time she was 24, she'd scraped together enough from odd jobs and weekend engine rebuilds to open the garage her foster dad once dreamed of. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers. And for Kay, that was enough. Until one afternoon, a sound outside her garage, sharp and sudden, made her drop her wrench. A small boy, a tipped wheelchair, and just like that, the world she carefully pieced together was about to change. Because sometimes the things we're meant to fix aren't engines at all. They're hearts. And Kay, well, she was about to meet 2 of the most broken hearts she'd ever known. Let's step into that moment. The gravel, the dust, and a 5-year-old boy named Lucas lying beside his fallen chair. That's where it all begins. The sun was dipping low that afternoon, casting long amber shadows across the gravel in front of Kay's garage. She was wiping sweat from her brow, tightening the last bolt on a stubborn old pickup engine, when she heard it, a sudden clatter. Not metal, not tools. Something softer, something smaller. Kay turned sharply and froze. Just a few feet away from her garage door, a small wheelchair lay tipped over. One was still spinning slightly in the gravel. And next to it, a little boy, dust on his cheeks, tiny hands scraped raw, wide blue eyes blinking in confusion. No one else in sight. No parent. No adult. Just this kid. Alone. Scared. On the edge of a highway. She didn't think. She moved. "Hey, kid, are you okay?" Her voice was firm but full of concern as she sprinted across the lot and dropped to her knees beside him. He looked up, blinking through the dust. "I'm okay," he mumbled, trying to sit up on his own. Kay gently brushed the grit from his cheeks, checking his arms, his knees, his eyes. "What are you doing out here all alone?" she asked softly. "Who lets a little guy like you roll around this close to the road?" Before he could answer, a car door slammed in the distance, loud and panicked. "Lucas." The voice came from across the street, a man in a tailored suit, sprinting from the entrance of a convenience store. His shoes were too expensive for this gravel road. His breath caught in his throat as he dropped to the boy's side. "Oh, God, you hurt," he gasped. Kay stood slowly, her voice sharpening. "Is he yours?" The man looked up, startled. "Yes, I just ran in for juice." "He must have. You left a disabled child alone in a car?" Kay snapped. Her tone wasn't cruel, but it was the kind that didn't allow excuses. "I was gone for 1 minute," the man insisted. "He must have unlocked." "It only takes 1 second," she cut in. The little boy tugged on Kay's sleeve. "It's okay," he whispered. "I just want to see the cool cars in your shop." Her expression softened for the first time. "You like cars, huh?" He nodded quickly. "I love engines. My chair has wheels too, see?" She crouched beside him again, examining the wheelchair, its alignment crooked, the brake handle bent. "This thing's taken a beating," she muttered. The man stepped forward, guilt tightening his voice. "I'll get it fixed." "No," Kate interrupted, not unkindly. "I'll do it now. No charge, so he can move without hurting himself." The boy lit up. "Really?" Kay nodded, lifting him gently into her arms with the kind of care that doesn't come from training. It comes from instinct. And that's the thing about kindness. It doesn't always wear a smile. Sometimes it comes wrapped in grit, in grease-stained jeans, and in voices that sound like scolding, but are really just scared to see a child hurt. Kay didn't see herself as a hero that day. She saw the kid who needed someone to care, and maybe, deep down, a part of her remembered what it felt like to fall and have no one come running. The man followed her into the garage, awkward and quiet. "I'm Daniel," he finally said. "Kay," she replied, already pulling tools from the wall. "Try not to let that happen again, Daniel." And just like that, under humming lights and the soft tick of fan, 3 lives began to quietly collide, not with grand gestures or dramatic speeches, but with one broken wheel, a firm voice, and a boy with starry eyes who saw something special in a girl who'd stopped believing she was. What happened next? Well, let's just say it involved a crayon drawing, a nickname that stuck, and a bond that not even the most expensive lawyer could break. Let's keep going. Daniel Carter wasn't used to being talked to like that. Not in boardrooms, not in interviews, and definitely not in a dusty old garage by a woman with motor oil on her cheek and zero concern for brand of the suit. But that's exactly what made it sting. Cayman Road didn't care who he was. To her, he wasn't a billionaire. He wasn't a CEO. He was just a man who left his son in a car and nearly lost him to the gravel. Daniel stood stiffly inside the garage, eyes darting around as if looking for something to anchor him. But there was no luxury here. No walls lined with awards or polished floors. Just rusted tools, old calendars, and a boy on a stool swinging his legs like nothing had happened. Lucas had already moved on, but Daniel hadn't. He was embarrassed, defensive, angry, not at Kay, not really, at himself. "You're good with him," he said quietly, as Kay adjusted the bent wheel on the chair. She didn't look up. "He's a good kid. He doesn't open up like that, not with most people." Kay shrugged. "Maybe you just don't give him enough room." That landed like a stone. Here's the thing about Daniel Carter. He didn't start out as a man in the suit. He built his empire from scratch. But somewhere along the way, from hospital rooms to corporate takeovers, he forgot how to just be someone's dad. He measured his worth in deals closed, not bedtime stories told. And for a brief, uncomfortable moment, he realized something. This grease-stained mechanic knew more about connecting with his son than he did. And that realization, it bruised. Because it's one thing to be powerful. It's another to feel powerless when it matters most. Daniel cleared his throat, trying to change the subject. "I should pay you for this," he said, pulling out a sleek black wallet. But Kay just gave him a look, the kind that stops a man mid-sentence. I told you, it's not about payment. It's about him. She gestured toward Lucas, who was now watching her every move, eyes wide with wonder. Daniel followed her gaze, and in that moment, something shifted. He saw not a mechanic, but a woman who gave more than she had to give, and a son who smiled more in this garage than he had in weeks at home. Sometimes, the first clash between two people isn't about anger. It's about truth, raw, unwelcome, but necessary. Kay had cracked open a truth Daniel didn't want to face, and deep down, he respected her for it, even if it hurt. As the wheelchair's final bolt clicked into place, Kay looked up, all set, should ride smoother now. But keep an eye on that front axle. Might need replacing in a few months. Daniel nodded slowly. Thank you, really. She gave a half smile. Just do better. Lucas beamed. You're awesome, Miss Kay. And for the first time that day, she smiled fully. Thanks, buddy. I think you're pretty awesome, too. That moment, 3 people, 1 garage, and a whole lot of unspoken understanding, was the start of something. Not a fairy tale, but something real. And very soon, it would become something even more unexpected. Because Lucas was already drawing again, and this time, he had a picture to give. Let's see what it was. The sound of the drill faded. The last bolt was in place. The wheelchair stood upright, balanced, steady, whole again. Lucas clapped quietly from the stool, eyes shining. To me, it looks brand new, he grinned. Kay wiped her hands on a rag, half smiling. Not bad for a garage with more rust than chrome. Daniel stood nearby, silent, still watching her, not just for what she fixed, but how she did it, with care, with patience, with a kind of quiet focus that didn't come from training, but from heart. Then Lucas did something unexpected. He reached into the pocket of his hoodie, fingers fumbling. I made this, he said shyly, before the juice and the hole falling out of the chair thing. He handed her a piece of paper, slightly wrinkled, edges crumpled, crayon colors peeking through. Kate took it gently, unfolded it slowly, and there she was, drawn in bright colors, with messy brown hair, big green eyes, and hands that glowed gold like sunbeams. Above the picture, written in a child's uneven scrawl, the girl with golden hands. Kay froze. Her throat tightened in a way she didn't expect. No one had ever called her golden. Not once. Greasy, stubborn, too rough around the edges. But golden? That was new. My mom used to say people with golden hands make the world better. Lucas explained, his voice matter of fact. She said they fix things people give up on. Kay blinked hard, her fingers brushing the crayon lines. Thank you, Lucas, she whispered. This is the best thing I've gotten in a long, long time. And she meant it, not because it was a masterpiece, but because it was the first time someone had seen who she really was, and decided she was something good. She walked to the back of the garage, past old invoices, hanging keys, and an outdated calendar, and pinned the drawing right in the center of the wall, the heart of her space, lit by a patch of sunlight slipping through cracked windows. In that moment, the garage didn't feel like a job anymore. It felt like home. Daniel watched, his voice softer now. Have you ever thought of working with kids like Lucas? Kay turned to him, eyebrows raised. I'm a mechanic, not a babysitter. I'm not asking for a babysitter, Daniel said. He just connects with you. I haven't seen him light up like that in months. He hesitated, then added, maybe you could hang out with him a few hours a week. Talk, build stuff, whatever comes naturally. Kay looked at Lucas, who was now turning a wrench over in his lap, like it was the most fascinating object on earth. She didn't say yes. Not yet, but she didn't say no either. Here's the thing about purpose. It doesn't always show up with a plan or a paycheck. Sometimes it walks in on wheels, falls into the gravel, and hands you a drawing that changes everything. She slipped Daniel's business card into her back pocket as the afternoon light began to fade. She wasn't sure what would come next, but for the first time in a long time, she was curious, and that was more than enough. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that this small moment, this drawing, this bond, was already beginning to stir a storm on the horizon, because when hearts start to open, sometimes the past comes knocking. Let's turn the page. Kay almost didn't go. She stared at the crumpled paper with the address scribbled on the back of Daniel's business card, sitting on her kitchen table like it didn't belong. Because let's be honest, she didn't think she belonged. Fancy dinners? CO estates? She'd been raised in foster homes and auto shops, not country clubs. And yet, something in Lucas's eyes when he asked, "Will you come?" made it impossible to say no. So she cleaned the grease from under her nails, pulled on her least wrinkled shirt, and drove her old pickup along winding roads into the hills. The moment she saw the house, her breath caught. It wasn't a mansion in the gaudy sense. It was warm, modern, walls of glass and stone, glowing in the setting sun like a place pulled out of a dream. Her truck looked hilariously out of place next to sleek black sedans and quiet electric cars. But when the front door swung open and Lucas came rolling out in a button-up shirt slightly too big, shouting, "You came!" every bit of awkwardness melted away. Daniel appeared behind him. No tie this time, just rolled up sleeves and something softer in his smile. "We made apple pie," he said. "I didn't bake it. I know my limits, but I thought you might like it." Kay laughed under her breath. "You're really pulling out the big guns, huh?" Dinner was set on the patio beneath soft lights that swayed gently in the evening breeze. The view stretched across a valley of trees, painted gold by the last rays of sun. And for a moment, Kay forgot the oil stains and the rusted garage doors. But then came the silence. The kind that creeps in when you realize everyone around this table probably went to private schools, drank wine that cost more than your month's rent, and never had to explain why they stole a wrench at 19. She shifted in her seat. Daniel noticed. "You okay?" She looked out toward the trees. "I'm just wondering what I'm doing here," she said quietly. All of this, it's not my world." Daniel leaned in, not with pressure, but with sincerity. "You belong wherever people see your worth." He nodded toward Lucas, who was busy drawing a flying robot with a tool belt. "He sees it. I see it. Maybe it's time you saw it too. Sometimes we don't need to change who we are. We just need someone to remind us we're already enough." Later, after dessert and silly stories and one too many glasses of wine, Kay and Daniel sat by the fireplace while Lucas dozed off, curled beside her like a puppy. Daniel looked at the quiet scene and said softly, "My wife passed when Lucas was 2. Since then, I've built an empire and completely forgotten how to rest." He glanced at her, his voice low. "You bring peace into our chaos." Kay didn't know what to say. She wasn't good with soft moments, but she looked down at the boy on her lap and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Stillness, safety, something dangerously close to hope. "I can stay a little longer," she whispered. Daniel nodded, eyes full of something unspoken. And right there, in a glass-walled house far from her greasy little garage, a new kind of family quietly began to form. But when hearts begin to open, the past has a way of finding the door. And sometimes the person knocking isn't coming to say hello. She's coming to take everything back. Let's see who arrives next. It started with a buzz at the front gate. Daniel had just returned from a meeting, still in his blazer, loosening his tie when his assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Sir, there's a woman here. Says her name is Tiffany Carter." Daniel froze. The name hit like cold water. It had been years since she left, since the papers were signed, since she walked away from her son without looking back. And now she was here. Moments later, the front door opened, and Tiffany walked in like she owned the place. High heels clicking against hardwood, designer bags slung perfectly over one shoulder. Her perfume filled the air before a single word did. "Well, hello, darling," she purred. Her eyes weren't on Daniel. They were scanning, measuring, calculating. And when they landed on the child's artwork on the wall, she smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You've redecorated." Daniel kept his voice even. "What are you doing here?" She blinked. "What a cold welcome. I'm still his mother, aren't I?" "You haven't acted like one in 5 years." Tiffany shrugged, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her dress. Well, I've had time to reflect. And watching from afar, I couldn't help but notice things have changed. She turned sharply. That mechanic girl, for instance. Daniel's jaw tightened. And then, like venom, came the words that would shake Kay's world. I did a little digging, Tiffany said sweetly. Did you know she has a record? Petty theft. 19 years old. Caught stealing from a hardware store. Not exactly maternal material. Daniel stood, silent but seething. You think the press would love this? A CEO letting a criminal play house with a disabled child? I could file for custody tomorrow and cause a storm your investors would drown in. Here's the thing about people like Tiffany. They don't just knock. They barge in, wearing perfume and power, twisting truth into weaponry. And for people like Kay, who have worked so hard to outrun their past, it's not the crime that hurts the most. It's the reminder that some people only ever see who you used to be. The next day, Kay opened the garage to find Tiffany standing there, arms crossed, heels sinking slightly into gravel. You must be Kay. Kay, wiping her hands with a rag, raised an eyebrow. And you are... I'm Tiffany, Lucas's mother. That stopped her cold. Tiffany stepped forward. Let me give you some advice, she said, voice like ice. You've had your fun playing mechanic, Mom, but don't pretend you belong in his life. Kay stood straighter. Excuse me? Oh, please, Tiffany sneered. You think Daniel's gonna choose you? You think my son should be raised by someone with a criminal record? Kay's throat tightened. The words cut deeper than they should have. You don't know anything about me. I know enough, Tiffany snapped. And if you don't walk away, I'll drag this whole circus into court. That night, Kay sat in her tiny apartment above the garage, holding the drawing Lucas had given her, the girl with golden hands. But all she could feel was the dirt on them. Old dirt, years old, still there. Sometimes, it's not the world that doubts us. It's the echo of who we once were, coming back in heels, perfume, and perfectly timed cruelty. Kay had built a quiet, careful life. And now, it was under threat from a woman who didn't care about love, only control. So she made a choice to disappear before she could be taken down, to leave before Lucas got caught in a custody war he didn't deserve. But what she didn't know was that Lucas had already made his choice. And soon his voice, small, clear, and impossibly brave, would change everything. The hardest part of walking away isn't the distance. It's the weight of what could have been, the laughter that might have filled more nights, the quiet moments you never knew you'd miss, until they're gone. That's what Kay carried when she packed the small cardboard box. Inside, a drawing with golden hands, a red plastic wrench Lucas had insisted she keep, and a few toy bolts they'd once used to upgrade his old chair. She didn't cry. Not then. Just folded the top of the box slowly, sealing more than just cardboard. She was sealing off a chapter she hadn't planned to write, and certainly hadn't wanted to end. When Daniel appeared at the garage that evening, hair windblown, eyes wide, he knew before she even spoke. She found you, he said. Kay nodded. She said she'd destroy you, that she'd drag Lucas through court, that I'm not enough. Daniel stepped closer. You are enough. But she didn't meet his eyes. I used to be a girl who stole a wrench because she was hungry, Daniel. She'll make sure the world remembers that version of me. He reached out, voice cracking. Then we fight back. We find a lawyer. We tell the truth. But Kay shook her head slowly. She doesn't care about truth. She only cares about control. And Lucas, she looked away. Lucas deserves peace. There's a certain kind of strength that comes with staying. But sometimes the truest strength is in walking away, in choosing love not as possession, but as protection. Kay wasn't leaving because she didn't care. She was leaving because she cared too much. As Daniel stood frozen, she handed him the box. Give these back to him. He shouldn't lose the memories just because I'm not around to make new ones. He didn't move. Kay, I'm not leaving him, Daniel, she whispered. I'm leaving the war. That night, alone in her small apartment, she held Lucas's drawing under the dim light of a flickering lamp. Her thumb traced the words again and again. the girl with golden hands. But in that moment, all she felt were the stains of her past. "I thought I was protecting him," she whispered into the dark. "But maybe he needed someone better, someone with clean hands." She placed a drawing into her bedside drawer, like a goodbye letter she couldn't bring herself to write. And then the silence closed in. Here's what no one tells you about selfless love. It's not loud. It doesn't demand to be noticed. It slips away quietly, hoping its absence causes less damage than its presence ever could. But love doesn't disappear just because you leave. And Lucas, he wasn't done loving her. In fact, what he did next, what he wrote next, would tear the silent apart and pull Daniel into a storm no business plan could prepare him for. Because some truths don't need lawyers to be heard. Just the handwriting of a heartbroken 5-year-old boy. The rain began that night. Not just a drizzle, but a storm. Heavy, relentless, like the sky itself had something to grieve. Inside the Carter estate, the lights were dimmed. The warmth of the fireplace had faded, and the silence was no longer peaceful. It was hollow. Lucas hadn't spoken since Kay left. He hadn't eaten, had barely moved. Daniel had tried everything, jokes, movies, even a new Lego set. But the sparkle in Lucas's eyes? Gone. The pediatrician came. She checked his vitals, his temperature, his lungs. No infection, she said. He's not physically sick. But emotionally, she looked at Daniel carefully. He's heartbroken. That's not something I can treat with medicine. Daniel sat on the edge of his son's bed that night, fingers gently brushing the curls on Lucas's forehead. "Buddy," he whispered, "you've got to eat something. Just a little water?" Lucas didn't reply. His lips barely moved. His eyelids fluttered, but stayed shut. That's when Daniel noticed the paper, clutched tight in Lucas's small hand. Crumpled, tear-stained. He gently pried it loose, careful not to wake him. And then he saw it, written in large, shaky block letters. "If I can't have Miss Kay, I don't want anything. I'll be sad forever." Signed in the corner, like a broken promise. Lucas. Daniel stood up so fast, the chair tipped behind him. His heart pounded, not with anger this time, but with urgency. This wasn't about custody. This wasn't about reputations or press or who had to clean or resume. This was about a little boy who had finally found home and then watched it walk away. And when someone you love is drowning, you don't wait. You dive. Daniel grabbed his coat and keys. The storm outside didn't matter. The roads were slick, the rain fierce. But none of that compared to the storm inside his son's room. He drove like a man possessed, through winding streets and blinding rain, headlights cutting through sheets of water like hope slicing through fear. And when he reached the garage, he didn't knock gently. He pounded. "Kay!" His voice cracked. "Open the door, please." Nothing. He shouted again. "It's Daniel. It's Lucas. He's not okay. He's not eating, not speaking." He wrote a note. He says losing you made him sad forever. The door creaked, opened slowly. And there she was, barefoot, in an oversized sweater, hair damp from the leaking window, eyes red but steady. "Daniel?" Her voice was barely a breath. He didn't wait. "It's not about courts, not about Tiffany, not about any of it. He doesn't care that you once stole a wrench. He cares that you fixed him. He chose you." Kay's hand flew to her mouth, a gasp escaping. "I thought I was protecting him," she whispered. "I thought leaving was the right thing." "You are what's right," Daniel said. "No one else ever saw him like you do." Then, softer, "I didn't either. Until you." And just like that, something cracked. Not from the storm outside, but from the wall Kay had built to keep herself out of other people's lives. It broke, and in its place came something fragile but real. "I'm coming back," she whispered. "I'm not leaving him again." Less than an hour later, Kay sat beside Lucas's bed. The storm had quieted to a whisper outside. Inside, it was still. She reached for his hand. "Hey, little man," she said gently. His fingers twitched. Then slowly, his eyes opened. "Miss Kay?" "I'm here," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm right here." He reached out and she gathered him into her arms, holding him close, rocking gently, like a lullaby without music. Daniel stood in the doorway, watching in silence, and in that moment, color returned to Lucas's cheeks, warmth returned to the room, and something else returned to family. Because love, when it's real, doesn't just knock. It breaks down the door when it has to, even in the rain, especially in the rain. But though the storm had passed, the world outside was still watching, and soon that world would find out about them. Let's see what happens when the headlines hit. The next morning, the world woke up to a story they didn't expect. A blurry photo. Kay stepping out Daniel's car, Lucas asleep in her arms, splashed across headlines. Billionaire CEO in secret romance with mechanic with a criminal record? They call her a gold digger. Said she was manipulating a grieving child. Questioned Daniel's fitness as a father. Questioned her worth as a human being. And just like that, the garage girl with golden hands was being torn apart by people who'd never met her. Kay stood in her tiny bathroom that day, clutching her phone, reading the comments. She's just using him. Where was she when he built his empire? Lucas deserves better. She didn't cry, not at first, but when she looked at her reflection, at the oil-stained shirt, the soft lines under her eyes, the quiet strength in her jaw, she whispered to herself, I knew this would happen. She packed her bag again, not out of guilt, but out of fear. Fear not for herself, but for Lucas. I can handle being hated, she told Daniel that night on the porch. But I won't let them drag him into the fire just to burn me. Daniel sat beside her, silent for a long time. Then he asked her one simple question. Do you love him? She looked down at her hands. Calloused, rough, real, more than anything. And me, her breath caught. She hadn't said it out loud, not even to herself. But it was there, swelling, honest, unshakable. Yes, she whispered. Daniel stood, then bent down, gently placed his hand over hers. Then let me protect you. The next morning, Daniel Carter walked onto a live national broadcast. Suit pressed, tie straight, eyes clear. The host was ready, sipping drama like coffee. Mr. Carter. The media's calling her a gold digger. Some say she's after your name, your wealth. Others question her past. Daniel didn't flinch. He leaned in, voice steady. Her name is Kay Monroe. She's the woman who pulled my son out of gravel and gave him back his smile. She's the one who stayed when things got hard and left only to protect him. He looked straight into the camera. She is not the person they say she is. She's the reason we're a family again. And if you want a headline, here it is. I love her, and I will spend the rest of my life proving that she deserves every good thing this world has to offer. There was a pause. Silence, thick and golden. Then the phone lines lit up. Viewers called in, mothers, veterans, single dads, foster kids, sharing their stories, their support, their belief in second chances. The tide turned. Tiffany, watching from her condo in quiet disbelief, knew the battle was over. She quietly withdrew her legal threats, and for the first time, truly let go. That night, Kay watched the broadcast from the garage. She didn't cry at first, but when Daniel said the words, I love her, in front of the world, not to defend himself, but to stand beside her, she crumbled, not from pain, but from the rare and overwhelming shock of being believed in. Later that evening, Daniel and Lucas returned. Lucas ran ahead, launching himself into her arms. You're home, he whispered. Daniel followed, pulling both of them close. We're not going anywhere, he said quietly, because love doesn't live in headlines. It lives in moments like these, quiet, steady, unshakable. It's not something you chase. It's something you choose, every single day. But while the world may have backed off, their story wasn't over, because some of the most beautiful chapters are the ones you write when the world finally steps aside. Let's turn to the final page. 1 year later, the garage still smelled like motor oil, but now it also smelled like warm cookies, like freshly sharpened pencils, like possibility. Because ever since the media storm settled and the world stopped shouting, Kay, Daniel, and Lucas started building not just a life together, but something far bigger. They called it Fix It Forward. It began with one broken toy. Lucas had dropped his toy helicopter again, and this time, instead of pouting, he looked up and said, "Mom can fix it." Mom. The word was small, but it changed everything. Fix It Forward started as a little corner inside the garage, a shelf of old tools and donated parts. But soon it grew. Daniel used his connections to get funding. Kay taught local kids how to use a wrench, a soldering iron, even a drill press. Lucas, proudly wearing a tiny apron that said Junior Builder, welcomed every new child like they were part of something special. Because they were. These weren't just kids. They were dreamers. Many had disabilities. Some were from broken homes. Some were just lost. But in this garage, every single one of them found a place. A bench, a project, a person who believed they could fix things, even when the world told them they couldn't. One little girl, Marisol, came in barely speaking above a whisper. She had a prosthetic arm and a fear of being too slow. Kay handed her a bag of loose gears and said, "Show me what you can build." 6 weeks later, Marisol created a kinetic art sculpture that now hangs above the entryway of the shop. She titled it, "Nothing's Useless." Here's the thing about scraps. The world tosses them aside, but the right hands can turn them into something beautiful. And Kay, she had golden hands, not because they were perfect, but because they reached for what others gave up on, time and time again. Every evening, as the sun dipped low over Millstone, Kay, Daniel, and Lucas would sit on their old wooden porch swing. Lucas would hum. Kay would lean her head on Daniel's shoulder. And the world, just for a moment, felt whole. One evening, Lucas looked up, his voice soft. "I'm glad my old wheelchair broke." Kay looked at him, smiling. "Why is that, sweetheart?" "Because if it didn't, I might never have met you." Daniel pulled them both close. Sometimes, he said, the best things start with something broken, and that's the lesson they carried. That love doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to stay, to try, to choose again, especially when things fall apart. So if you ever find yourself staring at something shattered, a plan, a dream, a life, remember this. Sometimes what's broken isn't the end. It's the beginning. All you need is someone who believes it's worth fixing. So maybe this wasn't a story about a billionaire, a mechanic, or even a little boy in a wheelchair. Maybe it was a story about what happens when you choose love anyway, when you show up, when you stay, when you take the broken pieces, and build something stronger than before. Kay, Daniel, and Lucas didn't start perfect, but they found each other in the mess, and they made it matter. So here's our question to you. Seedling, what in your life feels too broken to fix? And more importantly, Yellow Heart, who in your world needs you to believe in them again? Backhand index pointing right if the story touched your heart, inspired your soul, or simply reminded you the beauty in second chances. Don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, subscribe, and drop us a comment below. What would you build if nothing was too broken? We read every word. We reply, and who knows? Your story might be the next one we tell. This is Mr. Michael Stories, where every story is built to heal, and every heart is worth a second look. Until next time, keep believing in golden hands.